I invite now our first panel to come up and join me, and in just a moment we'll get going with our very first discussion. Please, would you like? Sorry, not. I beg your pardon. I'm getting mixed up. If you have Kun Jiraporn, Kun Patralada, and Dr. Kareda, please come and join me. I think Kun Patralada might be running a little bit late. Yeah, but she'll be here any minute. Please. Microphone there. So why don't we get started? And we wanted to begin the event with a good macroeconomic overview and get a sense of some of the challenges and opportunities facing companies both in Thailand and around the region. And it's important to make the point here that we're not just talking about some of the macroeconomic factors, but also about how companies can communicate through these. What are the questions that come from investors, and how can companies best respond to them? And we can also look at some lessons learned from past experiences, and some of the Kun Patralada and Kun Jiraporn have been through some tough times with companies in the past and have some good lessons to give us. Let me introduce who is here with us now, and when Kun Patralada joins us, I'll introduce her as well. But sitting next to me here, Dr. Karida Baupijit is with she is the Research Director for the International Research and Advisory Service at the Thailand Development Research Institute, or TDRI. It's a leading think tank here in Thailand. And previously, she was Senior Economist at the Macroeconomics and Fiscal Policy Management Global Practice, and also the Country Economist for Thailand of the World Bank Group since 1999. She's been the main author of the World Bank's biannual Thailand Economic Monitor from 2003 to 2015, which is the most downloaded and widely cited World Bank document on Thailand. And welcome to our third panelist now, and I'll introduce Kun Patralada Sang Aseng, Executive Vice President, Finance and Accounting, and Senior Vice President, Financial Planning, Thai Oil. Very welcome to you. Kun Patralada started a professional career at the Industrial Finance Corporation, moved to Siam Cement Group, joined Thai Oil Public Company in 1991 as a financial analyst. At the time of Thai Oil's IPO in 2004, she took on investor relations. In 2007, strategic planning. Then in 2014, corporate risk management and financial planning in 2015. In her current position as Chief Financial Officer, she has a wide spectrum of responsibilities, including finance, treasury and accounting, investor relations, financial compliance, and others. She is an advisor to the IR Club of the Thai Listed Companies Association, as well as the chairman of the Corporate Performance Management Group, or CPMG, of the Thailand Management Association. Thai Oil is nominated for an amazing 9 awards in this afternoon's awards. These include Best IR by a Senior Management Team, Best Overall IR, and Best IR in Thailand. So we look forward to finding out the results later. I'll give you a quote about Kun Patralada before we start. As Thai Oil's new CFO understands IR. She used to be the IR manager, so she really knows what investors need. And in the middle, Kun Jiraporn Lung Sitang is assistant to the CEO of FN Factory Outlet. And Kun Jiraporn has had a career of over 20 years, spanning Moody's Credit Rating Agency in the US, Electricity Generating Public Company, or ECO, and GMM Grammy Public Company, with key strengths in investment, investor relations, corporate secretary, fundraising, and compliance. She's a dedicated mentor to the IR community and works closely with the Stock Exchange of Thailand in order to develop IR programs for listed companies. She recently joined FN Factory Outlet Public Company as an assistant to the CEO. So, as I said, we want to get a bit of a backdrop to help us with our discussions throughout the afternoon, and we're going to start with a macroeconomic overview. Dr. Karida is going to run through some slides and talk to us about some of the macroeconomic factors and challenges, and we'll also hear from Kun Patralada with some slides before we get into some discussion and Q&A. So we won't spend too long on these, but we'll well, at least these will give you some takeaways. And as we said, we have uploaded these to the app, and so you'll be able to refer to them later. We have a clicker. We can see how this works as you go through. If it doesn't, we'll just ask Gargi to advance the slides.
Well, thank you so much, Neil, and good afternoon, everyone. I actually am very honored to be here among all of you, and I somewhat feel like one of Charlie's angels up here, which is great, because in most of my other talks that I go to in the economic field, they're usually men. So it shows that actually, in this field, women play a critical role. So it's great to be here again. And as Neil said, I would like to just take you quickly through how I see, or how actually TDRI sees the development in the world economy, and how does it relate to Asia and Thailand. So first of all, to summarize in 3 words, the world in the upcoming year is probably going to be what I call DUV, divergent, uncertain, and volatile. And the picture of the gentleman up here is one of the big reasons that actually exacerbates the uncertainties and the volatilities in the world next year. And I will talk a bit on Mr. Trump's policies and how do we think it affects the Asian and the Thai economy going forward. But first of all, let me talk a little bit about divergence. Why do I say that the upcoming year will be a year of divergence? Well, if you look at the growth rates, for one, you can see that there is divergence in the growth rates across the globe. That is, there are groups of developing countries which are growing quickly, while as there are groups of developed countries that are growing but not as quickly. And among the group of developed countries, you can see that the US is recovering quite strongly compared to Europe and Japan, and other developed countries. So it's going to be a year of divergence, and this divergence actually brings about volatility and uncertainties as well. What do I mean here is that as the US recovers, right, interest rates rise, while as Japan and the European Union will keep the interest rates low. So therefore, as you all probably already expect, there will be a lot of capital volatility going forward next year. But on top of that, there are all these news that will be coming out of these developed countries. And here I'm talking about Brexit in March of next year, right? And it's not only a one-time thing, because once negotiations happen, there'll be news coming out from time to time on the negotiations as well. So that's from the European Union side. As I'm on the European Union, I also want to mention that Deutsche Bank issues are still on the table. You'll be hearing more and more about Deutsche Bank. We do not think that Deutsche Bank will cause a global financial crisis, but it will create a lot of uncertainties and volatilities going forward. So we think Deutsche Bank will not collapse, it will not bring about a crisis, but it will bring about lots of volatilities. Now, let's move a little bit to the US, which I've mentioned that will actually create some, uncertainties and volatilities as well. Oh yeah, sure, yeah, I'm not going to go through all the slides, so I'm going to just show you some of the slides that has to do with, for example, Trump's policies, right? So, for example, Trump's policies, as we see it, is pretty radical. Everyone is saying that, he might not do it, or Congress might not pass it, but, whatever. If he actually does implement what he says, then when you actually look at the long-term growth for the US, it will probably be lower than today, because policies of limiting employment, or restricting trade, that will adversely affect the US economy anyway. So in the longer term, if he implements those policies, we will expect the US to grow, but it will grow slower than it is today. Well, that's the long-term impact. The shorter-term impact will, of course, be all these uncertainties and volatilities around, the news that will come out on how he implements his policies or whether if Congress will actually, endorse his policies. So let me just take you through a little bit about how we see, for example, the impact of some of his policies on Asia and on Thailand. For example, one of his key policies is to impose higher trade restrictions, right? And he's talking more about Mexico and China. So how would that affect Thailand if he really does that? Well, first of all, let me say, I don't think he will actually do that because, first of all, it's going to violate the World Trade Organization rules, which US is a part of. So if he's actually going to raise tariffs that high, the US will probably have to pull out from the WTO, which is a big thing, and it's not likely. But of course, he can alternatively raise non-tariff barriers, right? So that will still be a trade restriction. And if he actually does that, it will affect trade with China, and of course, Thailand and other ASEAN countries who export a lot to China, and China assembles, those parts and export to the US, will also be affected. So there's an indirect impact on, Southeast Asian countries, including Thailand, through trade with China. But of course, the coin has two sides. The other side is that, well, if China is going to be restricted by the US, then there could be companies from China relocating to Southeast Asia and Thailand to circumvent those restrictions. And we've already seen some of that happening right now with the rubber factories from China that has relocated to Thailand. So, there is that, other side of the coin as well. I guess the other impact that we will see, other than on trade, before I go on, let me just step back to trade a little bit. Just want to mention that the Trans-Pacific Partnership is probably dead, but with Mr. Trump. It could be renegotiated later, but not, with Trump, because Mr. Trump has, said this upfront that he's not, a supporter of any trade pacts, actually. So with TPP not being ratified by member countries yet, and it doesn't even have to go through Congress of the US to begin with, now that he's president, it's not going to happen. So again, that's probably a positive, impact for Thailand, but probably not for Vietnam or Malaysia that has already decided to join. So we have a bit more breathing room here in Thailand, right? So I'm done with trade. Let me just move a little bit and talk a bit on investment. On investment, Mr. Trump has a policy of trying to attract American firms back to the US, right? And he's also lowering corporate income taxes there. So there are talks of whether American companies will actually move back, pull out of Thailand and go back, but that's probably unlikely, right? Because as you are in companies, that multinational companies come for a reason, many reasons, and corporate income tax back home is just one of the minor reasons. So they're probably going to be here, but the impact on investment, the way I see it, is more from the security side, international security side, because as Mr. Trump's policy is, focusing more on America, on the U.S., and pulling out from East Asia, pulling out the military from Philippines, South Korea, Japan, that could create instability in the region as China's influence rises. So this instability will probably, deter foreign investment, at least, in these times of uncertainties. They'll wait and see what will happen, with the South China Sea issues, and also with the influence of China that will expand more into Southeast Asia if the US pulls back. So I think that would be the other, more of the medium to long-term impact that will have. Shall I just stop here first, or?
Yeah, we can follow up some of the other points later on. That's a good idea. May I have the clicker, and we'll go through to Kun Patralada. So really we might rename this session. It's not macroeconomics, it's Trumponomics, right?
Right.
It's really, that's what the world is about now. We are looking at a strong dollar, rising interest rates, possible trade protectionism. And a lot of possible impacts on emerging markets and on Thailand and countries in the region.
Yes.
I'm going to flip forward past these slides, and ask you, Kun Prataralada, to take us through some of your
Sure.
Exhibits,
All
and then
right.
we'll get into some Q&A and
All right.
discussion.
Actually, our view of Dr. Kirada is somewhat aligned with our view in Thai Oil when we're talking with investor. So let it get back to the corporate finance world a little bit from the macroeconomic thing. So looking ahead into next year, during this period, in the Q4 this year, is a period that we have to prepare the business plan as well as corporate finance plan and also investor relations plan. That's why we take this chance to visit a group of investors, a group of banking financial institutions to see what's going to happen next year. And what's going to happen next year, how it impacts to our project. First of all, back to business first. How it's going to impact to our business, our project. And if our business and our project still viable, then how we going to finance it? Where is the source of financing, internal, external, bond market or banking market? Okay. Now, talking back about the economics that we looking ahead, as Dr. Kirada mentioned, we still see kind of like booming in US market, which is, I think, it is a pro for our industry because Thai Oil, we are in the midstream. Okay, midstream of the oil, we are not E&P, but we are conversion of the oil crude oil into the product and petchem. Okay, so in some of why I think economy of US booming is help offset with the European risk. Okay, while China we are waiting for the impact, whether it's direct or indirect impact from the US TPP or whatsoever, but there's still a hope in the China in some of as long as that has been slowed down for a year. So furthermore, deep collapse, we don't expect that one. But the Southeast Asia, this area that, as Kun Japan, the colleagues of mine, the FN outlet, right? The IPO is very successful. I think it's about Southeast Asia, somewhat the investor looking at what's going to happen with the growth of the net profit or revenue of this kind of like small cap or medium cap. Okay. But what's going to happen with large cap? Just for Thai Oil, for example, yesterday night, you heard about the OPEC decision making, which is over expectation, beyond our expectation, because we thought that they're going to cut, but only 0.5 MBD, million barrels a day, but they're going up to cut 1.3, which is double times that we expect. And that's why you see Brent crude jump by $5 per barrel in the morning. Okay. This is kind of like over expect, and it is in line with our year, quarter. You see that in next year, the oil price is supposed to be gradually up by maybe $5 per barrel. This is maybe $5 in one day, not a year. Okay, but you will see it adjust over the time. But you have to wait and see about economic, how economic growing globally as well. But we believe its tendency is high. So tendency is high, but not as high as $100 per barrel like back 2 years ago. So at $50 per barrel or 60 is still at the level that the consumer still enjoy the low oil price, and then the demand is going up. And that's why you can see the spread, the product spread of the product, which is decoupling from the crude price, still wider. And that's good for the converter or the midstream operator like us. So now back to the investor, right? When investor, we talk about the buy side, I'm sell side on the corporate side, and we have analysts at the sell side, right? On the sell side, what are they supposed to thinking about the company? First of all, in terms of buy side, how many kinds of funds that they are in the market? There would be global fund, which is, I'm sure that if fund flow flying back to US, then global fund, portion of it have to going back to that mother country that has a higher growth. But in some of regional fund, another kinds of funds, they are designated by the percentage to invest in the regional market, emerging market, or the market that provide growth. Anyhow, they have to stay here. So they will pick and choose the segment that provide the return or growth or valuation that meet their expectations. So I think this is good news for us as well. That's why when we talk about the oil segment, we try to kind of differentiate ourselves, that just not look at the pure oil price, look at the spread, look at economy, look at the demand, supply, new capacity, incremental demand during the year. Then you can see that in some of segmentation, they can look at the bottom up, look at quality of the company, and make a decision on investment. So when we do the communication investor, other than the GDP growth, as I mentioned, we always show them the demand-supply balance in this slide, whether it's kind of shortage or not in each country or in each region. Just you can see that we circle here in Asia, always positive in demand incremental. So we are in the area that is a spot of focus of the global in sort of oil industry. While when we talk about North America, when we talk about positive, you talk about like $60 million per day, right? Comparing to like almost $1 billion per day. Okay. So this is a spot area that we can talk with the global fund investor or regional fund investor that just look at this spot. And out of these like 800 or 900, I think more than 50% is belonging to ASEAN or Southeast Asia here. And Thailand is the center of the AEC. This is a story that we like to tell them. And in some of, other than, this is I mentioned already, right, but that other than the outflow back into this one, I also have, as Dr. Greta said, I also had a high hope on the Japan because they still keep the currency weakness, right? And then the QE is supposed to be continued, and then fund flow somewhat have to be expected from this area as well and help in some of Southeast Asia. So the Trump, okay, the same thing, we are get the information from the same sources. I think one of the quote from the policy announced by Mr. President, he always keeps saying that fossil resources pro, meaning that oil, coal, everything industry related to this one, he will promote, okay, and increase the efficiency. Okay. So this thing I think is a kind of encourage the level of the oil price. And then you can see the DUV, that's exactly the theme of next year. The investor will see the uncertainty or volatility as an opportunity to make money, right? So by the Q1 and Q2, where the policy has not been implemented, just start to announce, then you will see volatility both of US Fed fund by the middle of this year until next year in the first half. So by volatility, more or less, I believe that many funds managers will move some of their portion into the kind of commodity or cyclical kind of assets. Some of what in the Q1 and Q2. For example, in the oil asset that is going to rise, then they make a judgment. Okay, that's only some part. Some of the funds may be looking for the yield, stable yield, then they can pick and choose utilities that maybe not high debt portion because the interest is light. So the high DE company is not in the good picks, right? So maybe the company that enjoy the good structure or competitive structure, the cost protection, things like that. This is so many opportunity in next year that I can see. So that is an overall picture that we can get a feeling from Dr. Kirada that. So if I'm on corporate side, if I can raise the fund for the project, which area I would like to raise, Thailand or European or US, it can pave the picture. And also what kind of investor that I need to target more. We have existing like 3/4 of 50% about that. And 50%, 30% of that 50% is a foreign investor. So it's kind of keep connection with the existing investor and also eyes for the new one is very important for us. So this one is a kind of a backbone to pave the investor relation plans for next year for us, as well as the kind of investor meeting and roadshow. Yes, this is maybe it's a part from Dr. Kirada that I take the point.
Excellent. That is fascinating. And some of these slides, particularly the previous slides, these are from investor presentations. Is that right? This is how you communicate the opportunities for Thai oil. And they're excellent, very clear infographics, as we call them, showing the opportunities for Thai oil, showing the macro forces in the world. Very good example, both of the underlying factors, but also a way of communicating the corporate story. Is very interesting. Thank you very much. Now, Kun Jiraporn, maybe I'll bring you into the conversation now. And we're talking now about times of uncertainty and volatility. This is not new for Thai companies, right? Thai companies have lived through times of real uncertainty and volatility, and going right back to the Asian currency crisis. There are lessons to be learned. What can you suggest are some of the guiding principles for communicating through these times of uncertainty. And you can contrast, of course, your experience both from Echo to Grammy and now FN Outlet, right? Yeah.
Let me tell you something. When I first joined the listed company, I wondering why I need to know about the macroeconomics. We didn't. Why? Because when we go for the roadshow, when we go somewhere, we are the representative of the country, So we need to learn everything, and we need to know what impact to our company, so we can highlight or craft the message that match our company. For example, for Echo is an electricity company that have the power purchase agreement for the long-term power purchase agreement. What it mean? It means that revenue that Echo have is stable for 20 years or 25 years because it's already have the PPA in place. So what's gonna impact for Echo when the 1997, if you can recall, at that time the crisis, the basket of currency, the baht devaluation, right? So people worry about which place, which company that they should put the money in. Echo is a defensive play. Why defensive? No matter you use the electricity or you didn't use, you still need to pay. Echo as a wholesale, so they get money all the time. It's just like the rental of the car. So if you rent the car, you pay the rental by daily, right? If you use it or you didn't use it, you still need to pay the rent. But if you drive the car, you will need to pay for the variable cost or the oil or gasoline that you need to use, right? So the revenue stream for Echo cover everything. It's a cost plus basis. You know why you need to pay for the FT? FT is the indexation for the baht weakening. If the baht weakening, they have the adjustment for the exchange rate as well. So it's a very safe haven for the investor. So what we do, we need to highlight this for the investor that is only minimal risk for the company. If something happened, like the machine broke down, we still have the insurance cover. So buy Echo is like a bond. It's better than the interest rate for the saving account, right? So this what we need to craft the message for the investor and link to the economic impact. For Grammy is different. Grammy is a media company. During the morning period of this time, everything shut down. No agency pay for the media, right? What Grammy need to do? Grammy need to let the people know when they can get the revenue again. After 30 days, what they're gonna do, and something gonna happen. They need to tell the fact. What the fact is, and then what's the plan. That's what Grammy need to do. For FN Outlet, is a newly listed company at the moment. When you're talking about the FN Outlet, I can't believe that I haven't been there for 16 years of my life. It's opened 16 years ago, but I never been there because I think that the outlet is the second grade of the product. Yeah, I thought the outlet is like defect, good or defect stuff, but it's not true. FN Outlet is the kind of retail department store in the rest area that people can travel, and then along the way they can shop, they can eat, they can take picture, anything they can do over there. They can buy the good quality stuff and with the good price. They're very good in design. They pick they're sourcing the product themselves. They pick the stuff themselves. They design their own outlet, and then they have the distribution channel, which is the outlet that we have like 8 branches at the moment. This is what we need to tell people. People may think that during this season, the morning season, the sale may drop. Actually, it's different way, because like my dress right now is black and white. Yeah, these are the basic line for what we do for the outlet, and it's very cheap, very reasonable price. It's only 1,500. Go to buy. That's what we need to tell the people what we are. Yeah.
So always, as we were talking about before the conference, change is the nature of life. Things are going to happen, and it might negatively affect the company, but focus on the path through it and in the future, right? So always be telling that story for the future. And it's an interesting way you have of looking at it, is looking for that story, the narrative, as you said, pinpoint the story, right? Pataralada, maybe you could comment on that, developing the story. I mean, is there a way to address the negative factors or the challenges while steering the conversation to the positive opportunities that you see going forward?
Sure. We always facing with the uncertainty, and uncertainty comes with the negative, right? But I think as long as we understand the negative impact, what does it mean for the company, and what is the company measure or attempt to resolve it, this is very important. Oil price going up and down, they're always a positive and negative to us. For example, when the oil price come down in 2 years ago, it's come down from 100 to 40. It's kind of disaster of the net profit of the oil company and related oil company. That year, I think we posted a net loss of 4 billion baht. This is the first year ever after listing in the stock exchange. But what we have done, always communicate investors, is that oil price up and down is kind of like involving the working capital that you need to sort out. For example, if oil price up, you need more capital to finance the next cargo of the crude when we import until we sell the product. So you have a bigger number of working capital. At the same time, we have a stock gain in the P&L, but the stock gain wipe up its usage as a high working capital in cash flow, so net is zero. Again, the opposite side, if the oil price come down, then we have a loss like 10 billion baht in that year. But that 10 billion baht come to be positive cash flow. The same amount in the cash flow, so net is zero as well. So that's why we always communicate the net profit exclude stock gain and loss for them to understand and monitor the baseline of the company. So this is what I try to say, that we cannot avoid negative news or negative things, but you have to imagine it in advance, what kind of uncertainty can be happen and what kind of like protection you can do. For example, oil price up and down, the communication is one thing, but the protection is that how can you like reduce the working kind of like cycle the inventory, okay, or speed up the cash collection, or can you do some derivative or hedging at a certain point that the shareholders or board directors are okay with, and tell that story to the investor. That helps a lot. The other kinds of negative impact that may incur with the industry like us, other than oil price up and down, I would say that it's kind of like incident, any kind of incident, kinds of like oil spill or fire or anything that happened to the plant. So this thing always happen with us. We are in the industry for 55 years, has been through the good year and bad year, right? Therefore, I think as an investor relation, I have to see the refinery manager to see our side, what kind of mitigation that they have. For example, drought. People are also concerned about no water to run the power plant. Okay, look, take them to the outside. You see kind of desalination facilities that can convert the sea water into the water during the drought. So this kind of thing, you can show your internal kind of mitigation and system to the investor, and then they will impress, because when they talk to us, they read the financial statement here and there, but nothing, it's kind of like you cannot imagine, right? And once you show them, they can figure out, okay, why these companies are different from the other.
Excellent point. So site visits and take them out to see the power plants and to see the processes. Very good advice. Now, we'd be pleased to take any questions that the audience might have, and there's a couple of microphones there. We'd invite you to approach and ask a question. We'd welcome any comments or questions. No pressure, you don't have to, but if anyone has one, please approach the mic, and I'll keep my eyes open. But we'll carry on the conversation just now. I want to come back to, thinking again about the effect of Trump's election. And I mean, this is another example, in a way, of this nationalism, and economic nationalism that we saw with Brexit, and that we're seeing now with Trump, and that we hope not to see perhaps with Frexit in France or Italexit in Italy. It's the world had been moving towards free movement of goods and workers, and that has been very good for emerging markets. And in fact, just now we see the ASEAN trading bloc really maturing. At the same time, in the West, they're moving the opposite direction. What does that mean for the impact on this region? Is it going to are you going to see growth hurt, and could there even be a move at some point back towards nationalism in this region?
Thank you. That's a very good question, because at the moment in the West, there seems to be an anti-institution, right, sentiment where people are against whatever is in existence right now. But I think for Asia, especially in East Asia, we are much more open, because one of the reasons is because we were liberalized and we have integrated much later than the West. So we've just entered the game, so it's unlikely that we want to pull out of the game so soon. But definitely, there will be an impact if the West, decides, and there are big economies, and if they decide to restrict trade, there will be an impact, a global impact on East Asia as well. But one of the things East Asia could do, and there's a move towards that, because countries in East Asia also see that trend coming from the West as well, is that we ourselves are trying to integrate more, right? Either with the ASEAN Economic Community, which by the way is progressing slower than expected, but it is progressing, or China is trying to lead RCEP, for example, right? As another alternative to the trade blocks in the West. So there are initiatives in East Asia to try to integrate more, especially on the trade front, so that we will not be so much affected by the movements in the West. So I think that's sort of the movement at the moment, which is again another reason why there are concerns by some people, but by others it might be an opportunity that China's influence in East Asia will rise more and more. But that's just because the West is sort of pulling out. So
and that had been happening already. There had been this pivot toward China, and this is only going to increase that. More FDI from China, perhaps less from the U.S., and so on, right?
There could be that direction.
An equity strategist whom I follow was actually, he's based in the U.S., but he was in Asia during the U.S. election and talking to Asian investors. And he said actually it turned out that they were much less concerned about the U.S. election than they were about Chinese growth. That really the focus had to be on China. That's more important, isn't it, than what's happening in the U.S. with the dollar or whatnot. Do you have any views, Kun Patra, on?
I think it depends on the type of trade portion of each country in Asia, and also each business to China. For example, we have like 3 major business. First of all, refinery. Secondly, petchem. Okay. Thirdly, power. The first and thirdly purely not related to China, because demand is here in Southeast Asia, not from China. We sell domestic all the product into mainly domestic market. We sell the power to the national grid. This is in China doesn't impact these 2 segments. But in some of petchem, 50% of our petchem products are exported into China. Then if China slow down, have any problems, then it's impact to our customer. Therefore, we have to diversify the customer out of the China For example, India is a good place, Philippines, Middle East. So these kinds of marketing things have to be think ahead of the time. In some investor relation, when we see roadshow, I'm not going there myself. Only finance team. We also will invite marketing team, head of marketing or head of refinery to join our trip in order to learn what it is expectation from the investor in the market, and they can make a commitment at their work when they're going back. That's why in some of marketing, for example, when we take the commercial guys with me, he can learn like many expectations, and then going back, kind of prepare the marketing plan ahead of the time. So this helps us in my view.
Okay.
But so China is by area, segment by segment, but overall GDP for the country that cannot avoid.
Let me add something. It's very good to give the feedback to the management for the management decision, for the macroeconomic picture or anything. For example, I may tell this story many times. Since my CFO before 1997, he do the investor relation for those period long time already, and he feel like people come to ask why you never do any hedging for the bond. You have exposure in 50% in the US dollar. Why don't do any hedging? Because one of the board, on our board, they with the MOF, and then they think that no, the baht will never be weakened or is never devalued like that. But since the feedback for the investor many times, so he proposed to swap 50% of the debt that he have into baht, and that make our people in Thailand pay the electricity cheaper. This is because of investor relations thing. As Kun Patharada said, we should feedback or let them know what's going on, so we can adjust our strategic thinking or the strategic decision in the company as well. Yeah.
That's really an excellent point. And in fact, it provides a very good segue or introduction to some of the further discussions we're going to have. Indeed, one of the first things I want to talk about with the next panel is about that relationship between IR and senior management, including that trust and that feedback. So perhaps that's a very good place maybe for us to conclude our session and move on to the next discussion. Let me say thank you very much to Dr. Karida, Kun Jirapon, and Kun Patharalada. Thank you all very much for an excellent talk. Thank you.